Well, hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Richard Wade from ruralcrimes.com. And as part of our series of being very privileged, really, to interview and chat with people with an interest in the direction of rural crime in the United Kingdom, I'm going to bring on a guest in a moment who is Stuart Hand. Now, Stuart is the campaigns and policy manager at the National Rural Crime Network. I'm really, really pleased that Stuart's given up some of his time today, and he's going to tell us what's going on at National Rural Crime Network currently, what the direction of travel is, what's going on around the UK from the perspective of the National Rural Crime Network. And then later on, we'll no doubt lead on to a campaign that's coming up, Rural Crime Action Week. But I won't go into that now. I'll let Stuart discuss that. So without further ado, by clicking this button, Stuart appears in the screen. Stuart, good morning, sir. How are you doing? And thank you so much for joining us. How are you keeping today?
Yeah, no, good morning, Richard, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a real privilege to be here, and I'm doing very well, thank you. So,
that's
delighted to be here.
Well, Stuart, thanks so much. And just to set the scene, really, so people are aware, this is pre-recorded, so we're recording now. So whilst people won't be able to interact live like they do on some of our live streams, they do still have the ability, whether they watch this on LinkedIn later or indeed on the YouTube channel, to engage and leave comments and hopefully like and subscribe to the Rural Crime and Farm Safety YouTube channel, which I would very, very much appreciate. So we'll move in then. And so I guess a good place to start, Stuart, would be a little bit about yourself and what your role is within the National Rural Crime Network. And once we've got that done, we'll move on as to what you're doing lately. So the floor is yours, sir.
So thank you so much. Yeah, so my role really is, in terms of the National Rural Crime Network, is to bring together the partnerships around rural crime so that we can talk to government, we can talk to policing with a kind of strong voice and really kind of have a coherent, joined up approach to what we would like to see being done to better protect rural communities when it comes to rural crime and rural safety. And we've got a multitude of partners, and that's growing. We've got 35 police and crime commissioners, deputy mayors and mayors. Our key partners, the National Farmers Union, the Countryside Alliance, the CLA, and more. We're very much kind of building that coalition, and also starting to develop associate members and bringing in the commercial sector, because this really is a kind of joined up approach to kind of tackling rural crime. So my job is to bring all of that together and then develop the workflows of the campaigns that we can then take to try and improve rural safety.
So you kind of bring, as you say, like the glue that brings it. It's quite a wide range, a lot of stakeholders, isn't there? I didn't realise. Obviously, I'm an associate member myself with my organisation. And when I attended the conference in London, the March conference, I was not surprised, but really, really pleased, I guess, in a way, at the breadth of the organisations with a real keen interest in rural crime and its prevention across the UK. So to have you there as the glue that brings all of that together is, I think, a vital role without a shadow of a doubt. Does that include all of the police? So are you liaising with all of the police forces? And because it's at all levels, isn't it, really, your task?
It can be, yeah. I mean, primarily the focus is working at the national level, talking to government departments, DEFRA and Home Office in particular. We have a very good working relationship with the National Rural Crime Police Unit, which was set up only a couple of years ago, but that's been a big step forward for rural policing. And obviously bringing in the partners, because it's not just rural, it's rural, heritage and wildlife crime that we kind of look to campaign around. But yeah, there is some interaction with some of the local kind of rural crime teams, but predominantly our police and crime commissioners and our deputy mayors. That's their responsibility, and we liaise with them. So it's not talking to literally everybody across the country. There is kind of
Yeah.
a chain of where we can kind of go to find out what's going on.
With regards to the funding of the actual role that you've got, then where is that funding from? Who funds your position and the great work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so I mean, we're really transparent about where our money comes from. It's predominantly from our police and crime commissioners,
Yep.
and the mayors and deputy mayors. Obviously, we're moving to that kind of democratic model of having more mayors and deputy mayors, but also the invaluable support that we get from our associate members allows us to do a lot more with the resources that we've got. We don't have huge resources. We're a not-for-profit. We're not here to make money. We're here to deliver and deliver change.
Yeah, well, that's great then. And from what I've seen, there's such a diverse group involved, from big insurers to security companies and all sorts of different sort of enterprises with a different angle and a different sort of skill set to bring to the table. And I think it's great that there's so many in that mix. I was at that conference. There was an announcement, wasn't there, that there was a big chunk of funding was allocated, which was great to hear. And I was wondering where does that find itself now? Was it about 800,000 or $1 million or whatever it was?
Yeah. So that the ministerial announcement at our conference, we were delighted to be the platform for that announcement. That money was for the funding of the national police units, the National Wildlife Crime Unit and the National Rural Crime Unit.
Yeah.
And resourcing them, and they do quite incredible work. And if I give the example of the National Rural Crime Unit, that was not funded with any government money. That has been predominantly funded by the commercial sector.
Yeah.
Until that announcement, so it was a good step forward that government was putting money into to ensure that work carries on. But there's still a lot more to do around the funding of rural crime.
Yeah, I think you're right there. But you're right. It was really positive. It was a great announcement. And what I particularly liked about that was, you had Andy Huddleston doing his talk about the successes that the unit had achieved, and that was great. I know there's still a lot of work to do, and that there'll always be something more to do. But those wins and those successes that he was able to demonstrate to us during his talk was fascinating to me. And then for the minister to announce, plus there's a load more money coming, it can only continue the good drive forward. What I'd like to do, Stuart, I've got your slides here, which you can control your good self. So again, nobody wants to sit here listening to me talk, but perhaps if you want to take the floor here and talk us through your little sort of presentation, if you will, please, that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks. So this kind of first graphic here is a piece of research that the National Rural Crime Network commissioned and was published last year. And Dr. Kate Tudor, Durham University, undertook a big piece of research that looked at serious and organised criminal gangs and how they were operating in rural communities. And I think this piece of research sits at the heart still of what we are looking to do as a network. We are in the process of just developing our next 3-year strategy plan. And I'll talk a little bit more of the direction of travel where we go with that. But, all too often you see pieces of research, released and they gather dust on a shelf and no one ever speaks of them again. This is very much still the driving force between, as to where the network is going. This is our kind of guiding star. And I think it's really important for a number of reasons. But firstly, I think what this research did was it completely blew out of the water this kind of argument that had been kicking around that somehow rural crime and rural heritage and wildlife crime was somehow kind of niche, or rural policing was a nice to have or a luxury. Yeah. If we are truly serious about tackling organised crime gangs, then you have to be serious about tackling serious organised rural crime, because the business model, and this is what the research showed, the business model, it's not opportunistic criminals and all. This is long-term business model of criminal gangs moving between different types of crime and moving between urban rural areas, but seeing rural as a kind of low risk, high reward kind of opportunity. And that's very much what we need to, still need to tackle. And I think when we look at, current government initiatives, such as neighbourhood policing, which, absolutely kind of, the intention there is obviously to, put police officers back on the streets and have named officers within communities. Absolutely supportive of that. But I think what we have to be very vigilant is that rural communities are, in reality, getting the neighbourhood policing that they need and deserve, and they're not just kind of the focus shifts away. And I think this research again helps us with that argument by showing that's what it makes the business case for having tackling rural crime. And we will keep that at the fore of what we do and our new strategy going forward, which we hope to release kind of in the next few months.
Oh, that's great, and I think you make a great point, and the title says it all: serious, organised, and international. It's on a scale, isn't it? And these are, as you quite rightly point out, there's an element of opportunism, but predominantly it's very well organised and it's very well funded by very, very well resourced and shrewd gangs who roam the countryside and cross borders and cross counties and commit their crimes. And then as is also in the reports that Kate does some brilliant work in Kate's work, the way that they actually have the logistic chains already prepared, to get rid of the stuff across the world, literally within days. It can be in Africa or in the Ukraine or Russia. It's just unbelievable how organized, and it's sad to say, very, very effective that they are. But it's a big issue, needs some big resources to tackle it for sure.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's important to make that the case that we're not, this research. I mean, it linked rural crime to the international drugs trade. You got other kind of human trafficking, and it's what we're really keen not to get into is a kind of rural crime is worse than crime anywhere else in it's not. It's all joined up. And as you quite rightly say, the gangs, they don't care. Their business model will take them, from towns, cities, and into rural communities. And I think what we're sort of calling for is rural crime to be given an equal status in terms of, tackling rural crime alongside other crimes. It will be a different way. We need different because of the isolation, because of the distances that need to be travelled for police, etc. It requires a different approach to maybe policing in a town or a city, but it's making sure that when policing is operating and putting its plans together, that rural is included in that and not, as I say, just seen as a kind of nice to have. And when budgets get tight, often that's a key challenge at the moment, I think. And we, at the network, it's all about working constructively with people. We're not just going to sit on the sidelines and throw stones and carp. No one needs that.
No.
It's about how can we most effectively engage with government and policing, because we all want the same thing. We all want these gangs. We want to break this business model that the gangs have got.
Yeah, we'll come on later on, perhaps to talk about the personal impacts. I know that's one of the themes this year, and certainly in the work that we do here, we get to hear and speak to people who have been the victims of rural crime, and it's so much more deeper than someone's nicked my tractor or my trailer or my GPS unit. There's some real heart-wrenching stories behind, and the impact that it has on people literally is life-changing for many people. But we'll touch on that a bit later on. Okay, then. So shall we? Do we want to forward that? Shall we move on to the next? Next one.
So, as I mentioned, we don't want to sit on the sidelines and just be the person that kind of criticizes and complains. So, off the back of the research that was carried out, we put together our response, our 10-point plan. And, this is not about spending, billions of pounds on, policing. This really isn't. We are realistic, but I think we can be a lot smarter. And there are some things that need to change that can make the fight against rural crime more effective. And so, I won't, this is available on our website to have a look through, but essentially just kind of the key highlights from this. I think what we're looking to do with the 10-point plan is, sort of looking for understanding the full economic impact of rural heritage and wildlife crime. And that's one of our asks is a full economic impact assessment. We've got a flavour, we know from Kate's research, the type of people that are doing and what they're doing, but we never measure it all the way through. And that when we're making the case for, more resources, I think we need that. But also, I think things like data, better data, gathering data. It's been I think it's a problem in a number of areas, not just rural wildlife and heritage crime. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And things like training of officers to understand, what it's like to be a victim of rural crime. Because I think when we look at the kind of surveys that take place, whether it's the Countryside Alliance, there was a big one from Neighbourhood Alert last year, there is a frustration amongst rural communities and rural business that when they do report to crime, there's a lack of understanding of what that crime is, and therefore or there's no response because it's not deemed to be serious enough, and that leads to a kind of downward cycle of non-reporting of rural crime. And I think our 10-point plan looks at trying to tackle some of those on a very kind of practical basis. And we are working with with policing, the National Rural Crime Unit, with DEFRA and the Home Office. They've had this document. We're talking to them about it. We raised it at the kind of the Safer Streets mission, the Rural Safer Streets mission. So we are trying to embed this thinking. Some of these ideas at the heart of the government so that we can really deliver change on some of these things.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And what we'll do is people can see your website going across on the ticker tape already on the bottom there, Stuart. But I'll also make sure there's a link directly into your website to the page where they can download that. I downloaded it myself yesterday. So all of these resources freely available on your website, and I'll make sure we link back to that in the show notes. So there's a lot going on, isn't there? There's a lot of different challenges at various levels, which is really great to see. And what I've noticed, particularly I think maybe in the last year or so, seems to be more talk about rural crime now. And I'm sure it's in no small part down to the work that you guys are doing at National Rural Crime Network and on your social media feeds and all the rest of it. But there seems to be a lot of engagement, a lot of talk, and we'll have the Rural Crime Action Week coming up shortly, which we'll talk about towards the end probably. So I think it's been spoken about more and more and more, and it's nice to hear from you that it's not just at the grassroots level. That's important, and we'll mention what's happening to farmers and their businesses and landed estates shortly, but also at national level, at police level, at policy, and at government level. So there's a lot going on, which is really great to hear. What's the key initiatives on your table at the moment, and what's the ones that are likely to drive the most change that you're currently involved with, Stuart?
So I think from the kind of legislative point of view, there's a number of kind of pieces of legislation making their way through Parliament or have gone through Parliament.
Yeah.
I think what we're all sort of waiting to see with bated breath is the Equipment Theft Prevention Act, without getting too geeky about all of this, passed. But the devil is in the detail, and the detail has not been published. And I think when you talk about prevention of things like equipment and machinery and tool theft, GPS thefts for farm machinery.
Yeah.
We're very keen, and we've been pushing very hard with a lot of other people. These have been joined up campaigns to ensure that government includes those items in tracking and marking of equipment and tools. We're waiting to see what that looks like. We were told it would be sort of around summertime, so hopefully soon. So that's something that I think is really important, that we're kind of looking at. I think other legislation and we've talked about the serious organised rural crime element, but it's not all that. And I think the sort of the private members bill going through on livestock attacks by dogs, I think that's been a really kind of increasing issue over previous years, especially since the pandemic. And I think we're keen, and I know Rob, our board member, has been he's done a huge amount of work on this, and there's been so many times where this piece of legislation has fallen.
Right. Okay.
And because of the elections, etc., now is the time to get that through. And again, anything that the network can do to support that going through, we are and we will. And I think that will make a big difference, because farmers having livestock attacked by dogs, it's getting to a stage where that's I'm hearing more and more stories of it.
Yeah.
And I think we are at a kind of crossroads with the network. The last couple of years, it was all about re-energizing. There is more interest in this. Certainly, media are far more interested. We're getting far more interest from local authorities. The government are more interested. I think, and it's not just the National Rural Crime Network. It's everybody involved with this, making the case in a far more coordinated and joined up way. I think we're making it harder for people to ignore us. And I mean all of us. Partners, associate members, the police and crime commissioners, and police and crime commissioners are doing some fantastic work, funding rural teams, equipment, and just bringing all of that together. I think we're building ourselves into a really kind of strong voice where, as I say, it's kind of getting harder and harder to ignore us, which is great.
No, it is brilliant. Yeah,
and for good reason, because for the reasons that we've already talked about, and we will talk about in terms of the victims of rural crime. And I think that kind of leads on to what we're looking to do with our Action Week on the 8th of September. Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of move on to this final slide. So we are looking to kind of, we've talked about, we've got the academic research around serious organised crime. We do want to do further work around the economic impact assessment. But I think the final kind of point that we want to kind of really highlight is the stories of victims of rural crime. As I say, victims wherever you are, town, city, village, farm, it all must be taken seriously. But I think there's a real opportunity to really kind of lift the lid on. I don't think people quite understand yet what's really happening in that kind of the stories of how it's impacting people, and this week is our opportunity to kind of highlight some of those stories. And what we'll do is we'll kind of theme each day around a particular topic or issue, whether it's machinery theft and equipment theft and the impact that can have. And it's not just the economic impact of these crimes. There's also a well-being impact of this, of mental health, the pressures that it puts on business financially that then leads to those kind of stresses and strains. And I think those stories need to be told more than they currently are. Things like, and whether it's waste crime or heritage crime or wildlife crime, we will cover all of those. But again, I think there's also other elements to rural crime. And having mentioned sort of research that doesn't gather dust on a shelf, the network back in 2019 produced a report into rural domestic abuse called Captive and Controlled.
Right. Yeah.
And we're really keen for, we're working hard to make sure that rural domestic abuse is is looked at with the same kind of seriousness as other forms of domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. And so during that week again, we will look to highlight that, because there is a piece of work being done right now on critiquing the progress that's been made since 2019 on rural domestic abuse. So again, we hope that's a very sensitive issue, but we're looking to have some stories of victims, from across all types of rural crime, wildlife crime, and heritage crime, and show, as you rightly mentioned, I was shocked at some of the stories I've heard in terms of the level of violence and what's actually going on in rural communities. So this is an opportunity to start the process of telling those stories, but also as well to show the positive of what is being done. And I think it's really important that we do that. It's a balance. Rural police forces, local rural police teams are doing incredible work to support rural communities. And without them, I think a lot of rural communities would be even more frustrated than they are. I know it's easy to kind of sit and knock politicians and knock the government, and it's, let's give them a good bash. But I do want to say, the mayors, the deputy mayors, and the police and crime commissioners, they are really making a difference. There's always more to be done. We all want more. They want more. But we do want to tell, we do want to shine a light on the great work that's being done by them, and the politicians in general, because it's easy to sit and knock them. I've probably done that in my career in the past, but no, credit where credit's due. There's a lot of great work going on in a lot of forces, and I think it's not. I think my final point is it can be done. One of the kind of, I think, key roles now we're working on is sharing that best practice of where is it working. It can be done is my message. We don't have to choose between rural or urban, or this type of crime or that type of crime. There are forces out there making a real difference. I think that week is a real opportunity for us to tell those stories.
No, you're right. And I'm looking forward to that week. I know there's a lot. You've got a lot of stuff planned, and there'll be a lot of other organisations, my own included, and various other organisations with a vested interest in rural crime and its prevention, reduction, who will also be doing various things. But it's really good. I'm so chuffed that the theme that you've just been talking about, Stu, the victims, the people, how it affects them, is so important, because often we'll see the headline figures, we'll see numbers of X million pounds this year versus X million pounds last year, perhaps a prediction for the future. And then we'll see various types of crime mentioned and statistics. But the thing that's really vital, each one of those represents a farmer, a wife, a husband, or a child who's had their life turned upside down often, and very often violated with violence or the offer of violence, and it's traumatic. And I know this for a fact, 'cause I've spoken to some of the victims myself. It's life-changing business. It really is, by the ruthless criminal gangs. I think one of the points I made on my little notes here, I just want to refer to them, because I want to make sure we don't forget this. We've talked so far about what the National Rural Crime Network are doing, which is great, engaging all those different stakeholders, bringing some kind of cohesion and direction, and a voice, a big voice that I think we'll acknowledge is getting bigger and bigger as time goes on, and louder, which is great to see. That I wanted to mention that the criminals are very enterprising individuals and they move with the times, and they move with technology. And there's a lot of other cyber type scams coming along now, which I'll be talking, not today, but I'll be talking more about the other side of rural crime, like the cyber scams, the online marketplaces, which are like Facebook and car boot sales and doorstep crime and things along those lines, that we also want to make sure people are fully aware of those. Are any of those on the agenda at National Rural Crime Network also?
Yeah, very much so. I think that the cyber crime, as you said, I mean, that crosses, boundaries. But traditionally you have a sort of a more elderly demographic in rural communities, and maybe slightly more vulnerable to scams, online scams or phone scams or banking scam. So I think with the strategy that we're writing now, that's very much the next 3 years. What we're trying to do is look at, okay, what's coming over the horizon. And I think that's, we've put out a consultation, and so the feedback's coming in, right now. That will close sort of shortly, and I will be able to that's from our police and crime commissioners, deputy mayors, associate members, and all our partners have been able to feed into that. So I will kind of sift through that and draft. But that's certainly one of them. I think another key thing as well is infrastructure crime. Whether it's solar, you've got more and more kind of solar farms, you've got broadband cable, the things that the signalling on railways, I think are a lot of which are in rural and isolated areas. They're easier targets. And I think that's something I know that we are definitely wanting to focus on as well. There's a lot. I'd say over the next couple of weeks, I will kind of package all that up and share our kind of our future direction. But there's definitely a number of things that I think are coming over the horizon that we perhaps need to pay more attention to.
Yeah, it's very true, because the criminals are clever, as we said right at the get-go, and as the police get better, as we get better, then they'll just adapt and try something different. So it's great that those emerging threats are key on the agenda. I think we just come up to the half an hour here, Stuart. We said we'd keep it short and punchy, and I think this was a great opportunity for me to give you the last word with my thanks, saying, hey, I really seriously appreciated your time, because it's really important, I think, that people are aware of the work that's going on, that you're doing and coordinating, and the different levels that you're operating at. It's really, really important. What's come across to me is there's a hell of a lot going on, and if I'm listening correctly, there's plenty more to be done, but at least there's a big voice out there now, the National Rural Crime Network, plus all of its partners and associate stakeholders coming together and doing something. That's, I think, very, very important. So in closing, Stuart, how would you, before we send you out a shot, how would you like to close our little chat?
I think for me, just to touch on something that you've just said, and that's a huge thank you. This doesn't work if we all sit in silos and we all kind of go off and do our thing on our own. And I think that's probably been the case over, maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago. The network was designed to kind of break that down. And I think for me, my kind of final point is a huge thank you to our partners, our police and crime commissioners, deputy mayors, people like yourself who've joined as associate members. It is one team. The success the network has, it's not my success. It's not, the chairman's success. It's the success of all of those partners coming together and taking this issue head on together. And I think if we can build on that, get more partners in, build and grow our voice, I think together we can do, we can achieve a lot more than we are.
I think you're right. So that's a great point to end on. Everyone working together with some kind of direction of travel. So what I'm going to do, Stuart, is say thank you. I'm going to take you out of the shot. Please don't disappear, because I'm just going to wind us up, and then I'll quickly come back on once we've stopped recording. So you're going to disappear now. Thank you, Stuart. I just want to say a couple of words in closing. Obviously, say a huge thanks to Stuart Hand from the National Rural Crime Network for joining us today and giving us an insight as to what's going on, not just at the National Rural Crime Network, but amongst the stakeholders and the partners and the police and government. I think that's really, really important. And what I've picked up from today is there's a lot of different work streams going on, all interlinked. It's not an easy task, this rural crime reduction and prevention, because it's a fast-moving, well-organised, highly funded criminal enterprise that are doing their best to stay one step ahead of what is probably not the best resource currently, but again, as Stuart said, there's always moved for improvement, probably not the best resource from a policing perspective. And it's over a huge geographical area, so it's very, very challenging. And what I would say is, I know for a fact, because I deal with these people on a day-to-day basis, that the rural police teams do a wonderful job, absolutely outstanding work with the resources available to them. I think that's really important to mention. My final word is that there's something else that I want everyone to be thinking about. Whilst all of the talk that we've had today is absolutely vital, it really is vital, and I mean that genuinely, there's another string to this bow, and that's the farmer, the landowner, the rural business owner, excuse me, or the person, the families live in rural communities. You become the victim. You lose your equipment, you become violated, you might be threatened with violence, you end up suffering directly. Stuff might be insured and all the rest of it, but that's a side fact, really. The effect of rural crime is life-changing potentially, and often is, and it's a horrible experience. So my message to you in that community is, whilst all the policy work's going on, while all the police activity is going on and all these stakeholders are working, take responsibility yourselves and have a look around your own site. Put your criminal mindset headset on and go and just do a quick review of your premises and look how secure you are. Look for your own vulnerabilities and plug those gaps before the criminals come to breach them. So in closing, thank you. Final word, please feel free to subscribe and leave comments on our YouTube channel. Really thankful to Stuart and the National Rural Crime Network and you for watching. Thank you and take good care.